And I use the example all the time that emotions are like the rainbow. You cannot go in and just extract a color from the rainbow. It's the full spectrum. You can't go in there with a scalpel and say, blue is gone today. No, can't do it. You can't do it with emotions either. We have the full emotional experience, and that's what makes us human. How we get to show up and really be able to use that in our relationships and in our careers.
Welcome to Roots of Healing, a podcast where we explore the transformative power of self-care and holistic wellness in medicine beyond. I'm your host, Dr. Siri Chand Khalsa, and this week I'm welcoming Wendy Schofer to the podcast. She is a joyful mom, physician, and founder of Family in Focus, where she helps parents recapture the joy of raising a healthy whole family at any size by focusing on emotional health and relationships as the foundation to lifelong health. Welcome, Dr. Schofer. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
It is fabulous that we finally get to connect in person. Well, thanks to, Zoom and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that we finally get to connect and share this same time and same space together. So thank you so much for the invitation.
This is such a wonderful topic that I think we're going to dive in today. And firstly, I just want to ask you, what's going on with that sign behind you? Because it's really capturing my interest just right out of the gate. So tell me a little bit about how this relates to the work you do and your connection with perhaps your clients, your community. Tell me all about it.
You are totally calling me out. I love this. It's funny how my husband was kind of questioning before, is that distracting? And I said, actually, it kind of hits the nail on the head for everything. So this is actually a tapestry, and I'm just going to move this over just a slight touch here, that my husband and I did medical school in Philadelphia. We went to MCP Hahnemann, and there was one night that we were just randomly going down South Street, and I saw this tapestry in one of the shops, and I just fell in love with it. Now, mind you, I was in medical school. I had no idea what it was that I was going to do when I grew up. And it just was something that it just kind of struck me. Well, he got it for me for Christmas that year, and it just was so meaningful. And I was like, oh, okay, he really saw how that touched me. Well, fast forward, I decided to become a pediatrician. And really kind of recognizing how much all of these lessons kind of like infuse throughout my life with my approach with, being a pediatrician, being a mom, how much of it is, honestly, you will see very similar themes throughout Family in Focus. But how to really love a child. And at the bottom, it says children are miraculous. And just kind of the things that will come up, I'm sure, as a part of our conversation today. The words that jump out to me: joy, say no when necessary, and right there in the middle, teach feelings.
It reminds me of those little maps that you see in the new year that are like, pick 3 words from the big crossword and see which one jumps out. And I want to see which one jumps out at me. Let me just take a quick look. Somehow bake a cake and eat it with no hands. That somehow speaks to me of just the playfulness that you can bring into being in the kitchen and how powerful that can be. But so tell me a little bit about, your initial training was in family medicine, and then did you take a deep dive to really have the primary areas of focus be pediatric medicine, or do you still do the whole gamut? Or maybe I misunderstood that a little bit.
Oh, no. I love the question, because I don't kind of fall into particular boxes. So I am a pediatrician, board certified pediatrician. And in addition to that, I've also certified in lifestyle medicine. And I also had a career in the Navy. And in the Navy, we were all trained to be general medical officers, so general physicians as well. And so I have practice with pediatrics, with children. I have practice with, the clinical practice with adults as well. And so over time, I'm like, it's kind of like there's all these different arms. Well, I practice this way here, I practice that way there. I'm like, this is baloney. This is me. This is what I have. This is, starting to integrate all of these different aspects of, my interests, my clinical practice, and not just kind of saying, well, it's here versus there. And so, yeah, I am not a family physician. However, I work with the whole family. And within, Family in Focus, that's very much my approach. Now, that's a non-clinical role, so it's not medical practice currently, but there's more to come on that.
I'm excited to hear more.
There's more to come on that. But I really, truly believe in, addressing and treating and engaging with the unit of the family. I mean, the family, as I define it, it's not based off of your relationships or kind of like the titles that everyone has. Family is the basic unit of our society and of, human connection. And so I was introducing you to my dogs before we hopped on here. They are my family. My family is, my family by marriage and by birth is spread out all across the globe right now. And yet I'm here with family because this is where I am connected. And I also have the broader definition of family. So I play with that a lot. And I think it's really, kind of looking at the expansiveness. So many of our definitions are kind of like defining or kind of like hemming things in and kind of putting a little box around it. Like, how can we kind of expand beyond that?
One of the things I really appreciate about what you're saying is that what about if you're a younger trainee who is sort of looking out and saying, I want to have this interesting and varied career? What are the choices that you made along the way that allowed you to sort of keep expanding your definition of how you practice? Because I think that's a really hard thing to mentor, teach, and talk about. But what do you think are some of the characteristics that you have that allowed for such a wonderful, and I want to hear about Family in Focus in a second, but firstly, like to get to this sort of aspect of non-clinical education, coaching, in working in family systems to provide lifestyle measures that improve health, vitality, connection. How did you yourself allow that process to emerge? Because I don't think we hear enough about that. And I feel like some of the younger trainees often sort of sit back and say, could that be for me? Because right now my career looks really locked in.
Okay, so first of all, that is a beautiful question. And that question of, could this be for me? That is a beautiful question. I invite those that are hearing this to be able to say, how is this for me? Because I think that that's something that I never asked that of myself. That wasn't my journey to get here. To be honest with you, it was a lot of pain and a lot of examples of where I felt that I just was doing it wrong. So the real truth behind the story is that there is so many different ways that I felt like I wasn't doing it right, that I wasn't fitting the mold that everyone was saying this is what it needs to look like, whether that was around my medical practice, heck, even starting back with my training, that I wasn't a good enough student, a good enough doctor. I wasn't good enough as a mom. So many different places where I felt that I was just failing and not doing it right. And so later on, I had the ability to see that this was just many different phases, recurrences of burnout that I was experiencing, but I did not have the language back then to be able to describe that. I thought it was all me. And I will always quote, yes, I will. One of my favorite songs, Taylor Swift, It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Anyway, that's what I thought. But that's, kind of that voice of burnout and the shame. And I wasn't able to grow and expand. I was just barely making it through the day. And yet I was picking up along the way what did work. So I kept on getting feedback about how, I was not so hot as an intensive care physician, that it was something that I needed to work differently. And I recognized later on that I excel in outpatient settings with building relationships, with connection. It's really hard for me to be able to connect with, this is going to sound very flippant, but like in the NICU with micropreemies who are terribly sick and constantly like I'm on edge the entire time. That's very hard for me to connect. No fault of their own. It's just not the setting where I excel. And so over time, I started experimenting and putting myself in different places where I was like, ooh, this is different. This is different. And so connecting in the community, working with a local nonprofit that was addressing the social determinants of health. Hold on, this is different. Getting out and really exploring with nutrition and movement and yoga. It was all for me. It was all for me. I benefited. My family benefited. I was like, hey, how do I translate this into helping others as well? At the time, I thought that it was me just kind of like, all right, I'm going to go off and dilly-dally over here right now. But then I started bringing that all together. And so embracing all of those different aspects that were fueling for me, that really made me feel like I was on the right path, because I totally was the entire time. But it's not some kind of linear thing. It's funny how my kids having their existential crises about what am I going to do when I grow up? And I'm like, well, you go out and you try some stuff. You don't know what you like, what you don't like until you try it. You got to do it first. And you're like, oh, that's easy for you to say. You and Dad, you're just doctors. I'm like, just? They're like, well, you just went on this path. You're, college and medical school and residency and yada, yada, yada. And it got you here. And I said, honey, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is that I'm doing when I grow up. We all are. And so I love being able to share with, the students. So when I go and connect with the students over Eastern Virginia Medical School, where we both have our connections here, it's something that I love being able to share with them. Hey, this is what's possible by just creating your own path, not having to stay within the confines of what everyone says is possible, because that's only what's possible for them. You get to really define what's possible for you. And we don't know it, but you get to create it.
Wow. What an expansive way to think about, I think we really agree the journey is the destination, if you will, meaning keep inviting curiosity and keep, what is it you said? How is this for me? Not why is this for me? Is that how you said it? I'm trying to remember. We'll have to go back and.
How is it possible?
How is it possible?
Because so many times when we just kind of say like, is this possible? We're kind of like, yes, no, I don't know. How is it possible? Which is, again, kind of more of that expansive type of question about, well, first of all, let me try this on. How is this possible for me? And then we can also get into, okay, I kind of like the way that this fits when I try it on. How can I start working my way towards that?
Yeah, it's often just micro decisions, because I know that we'll have listeners in all stages of training that tune into the podcast. And I feel that some of them may not have to go through the toil that we did, because there are now voices like ours that are naming and describing how to approach it differently. I think we're close in training age. I finished med school. I took 4 years off between undergrad and med school. So I finished med school in 2002. So are we kind of close training wise?
Oh, yes.
So we
2001 medical graduate. So
right.
yeah.
So exactly. So we came through, there were no work hour restrictions. There was no really persuasive or present female mentoring. Now, pediatricians might have been a little different, but really, when we looked out, when we were in our training and residency, it was a sea of men. At least where I was at the Mayo Clinic, and I had 2 female attendings, as it would happen in the entire, all of the people who were mentoring us. And I'm curious, what dimension do you think us Gen Xers, if you will, can offer in terms of because you've really talked about the struggle that it's been to not feel ashamed, to not feel you're the problem, and to really lean into the unique vision of how you want to show up as a healer, as a transforming agent in community, as someone who connects resources to people and people to resources. I'm curious, what do you think is possible for us Gen Xers in terms of those leadership, mentorship roles now, that maybe we can change it a bit for the younger, all genders, lower trainees?
Yeah. The first thing that pops into my head when you're saying that is just leaning in and being completely honest about it, which is vulnerability. Just the vulnerability, because so many people, so my children, as well as anyone else in the community and the training pipeline, if you will, we kind of look at different individuals and say, oh, you've arrived, you've figured it out, or you've got, all this together. You took this beautiful straight path. And like, that is the furthest thing from the truth. And like I said before, I'm still, really trying to define and redefine and refine. I don't know, so many different ways. What it is that I'm doing, who I am, and how I want to show up in the world. But it all comes back to a phrase that sticks in the back of my mind is just be more you. And so much of the training pipeline, in my experience, was about trying to squeeze out, to remove all the things that were unique and special about me, about, as an individual, the personality, all the different things. It was like, that's not the way we do it here. This is what you have to do. And I think that I am at a place now where I recognize how much of that was just a complete and utter lie. That is the system, it's the culture. We can talk about the patriarchy. We can talk about how it's, really the core of the burnout that we are experiencing and the moral injury in healthcare and beyond. When we are taking individuals and saying, nope, that's not how we do it here. That's not the approach. It's you're the problem. No. We are, each and every one of us, a part of the solution. And the more that we can be ourselves and bring our true selves to work, to our relationships, my goodness, the vulnerability, because it's not all pretty. This is the real me showing up. And I really try to model that, not because it's like, this is what it looks like, but this is just me. And that is what it looks like. And so sharing the ups and the downs, sharing the hardship, sharing the full, experience. And so much of the work that I do now is in emotional health. And I use the example all the time that emotions are like the rainbow. You cannot go in and just extract a color from the rainbow. It's the full spectrum. You can't go in there with a scalpel and say, blue is gone today. No, Can't do it. You can't do it with emotions either. We have the full emotional experience, and that's what makes us human. How we get to show up and really be able to use that in our relationships and in our careers. That is living out loud.
It really is. And I just can't help but get so excited for all the kids you work with. Like, it makes me so happy to think about a pediatrician in whatever context. And I want to hear about what your current practice is, but really the emphasis on emotional health. And I'm sure in your family systems work, you do look at that inner child, right? Because there's this quality that adults have of reparenting, exploring emotional health, thinking about emotional, the EQ, if you will. And I'd love it if you could tell us, what do you think, if you could, well, we're skipping ahead to the end, but let me just interject this question. If we could bring more emotional intelligence into, let's just start with your specialty, what kind of training do you think, why do you see the value in it? And what kind of training do you think would actually move the needle for future pediatricians and some who may even be experiencing some burnout or personal, as you alluded to, the sort of depersonalization, the moral injury? Like, how could emotional intelligence in their work actually help their burnout?
Okay. I am so glad you asked this question because nobody goes there. So, oh my goodness. Okay, here you go. This is totally unscripted, and this is me like bringing it all together because this is all the different conversations that I have had over the last several days and bringing it together. I'm just saying the last several days because I've had so many wonderful connecting coffee chats with my colleagues in such broad ranging areas. And I'm like, it all comes down to emotional health, peeps. It all comes down to emotional health. They're like, tell me more. And I'm like, this is what it is. So I think that the opportunity is not just something with pediatrics. I mean, I just happen to be a pediatrician who's really leaning into it. And one of the things that really brought this full circle for me was a couple of years ago, our local schools here in Chesapeake, Virginia, were looking for community partnerships and contributors because they were bringing the social emotional learning curriculum to the school, and they wanted different stakeholders from around the area to be able to kind of pipe in about what that would look like. And as I was listening to the beautiful curriculum that they're teaching to children and the plans, and I was like, got a question. Peanut gallery in the background said, what about the teachers? They're expected to teach this, but how are they not just learning about curriculum, but the role of emotions in their lives? And not about curriculum as in learning it, but applying it. How are we supporting the teachers? Oh, by the way, what about the parents? Because when kids come home, and, they're talking about feeling their feelings, what about the parents? That's not the way that they were raised. That's not the way that they did it. You know what? Big girls don't cry. This isn't the place to cry, to whine about it, to, feel this way. Like, there's so many different things that are just baked into our society. I'm like, this is great what we're doing with kids. But we need to be able to expand it further, to be able to connect with the adults that are in children's lives, to be able to support them so that, by the way, they're not teaching kids, they're modeling it. That is, wow. Okay, I never said it out loud like this. This is my mission. I mean, that's really, as I'm looking at supporting really expanding the health, supporting the health of the whole family. It's not just about kids, okay? It's not just about them. It's about really creating that support so that, we can use all the different analogies here, but, the rising tide raises all ships. How is it that we support children by supporting those that are around them? mental health, emotional health, connections, community, and resources. We hear about the Surgeon General's report about parental stress and how they were, actually studying about stressors in kids, and that they then discovered along the way, parents are really stressed here. And that's really impacting the health of our children. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a little bit of data to be able to support all of this. But it's not just about creating all the systems work. How do we do that? Working with each of our families, and it's leaning into emotions, connection, relationships. And so I'm trying to circle back to your original question.
Okay.
But, as far as that training pipeline, how is it that we can build this in? I think that, again, it comes back to that vulnerability, leading by example. And I mean, that's what emotions are. We can't just teach emotions. No such thing. No such thing. I got into this work in the first place because I was like, what's missing? What's missing in this clinical interaction that I'm having? I've got the best plans, write it all out for families. They're concerned about how their child is growing and how their child is eating and mental health. I'm like, okay, I got you. This is how you eat. This is how you move. This is how you sleep. Come back 3 to 6 months. Let me know how you're doing. Because nothing changes overnight. And they come back. God bless them. They actually came back. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't work. Like, let me look at this. What is missing? And eventually I was like, I'm just going in and trying to change everything. I'm not connecting with them about what they're actually experiencing, about why they're butting heads when they try to change things, about why parents feel like they're failing because they're having all of these struggles with trying to help their kids. Like, failing, that isn't like something that we can all agree on here. That's an emotional thing that's going on. And I was experiencing the same thing. And so I was like, all right, over time, it became clear I was missing that connection, that finding what was actually working in their homes. And yes, the emotional experience.
It's so powerful to think about the vulnerability that comes from not judging emotions as good or bad. And I love your analogy of the rainbow, meaning it's our thoughts about the emotion that creates more mental drama than necessary. The emotions themselves are fully entitled to exist, and we can explore through coaching perhaps their origins in a different way. But all those emotions lead to certain outcomes and behavior choices and friction that probably largely inhibit those lifestyle choices that are health promoting if the system is in turmoil because people can't emotionally regulate themselves, or there's constant feelings of lack of safety, meaning the kid's a strong feeler, but mom or dad says not an option in this household. We've got routines and rules. And when it comes to the clinical side, as you were talking, I was remembering when I wrote an essay about this recently, the time I remembered that I learned to not feel in medicine, that was going to be very, very inconvenient. And I was a second year in the ICU at the Mayo Clinic, which is a pretty formal place. And we had, I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but there was a family, and one of the children of the person dying came in and sang Amazing Grace. And now, for those of you that haven't, maybe haven't been in an ICU environment, it's such high acuity. There's so much happening. And this, and I can even feel my throat closing as I'm talking about it. But there was this, she was probably in her early 20s, and she was like a church singer, choir singer. So her voice was very melodic. And I was bawling. Like, I was so touched. I was raised in a Presbyterian household. I'm Sikh now, but I'm very familiar with the notions held in this very exquisite song. And everyone in the family's crying. I'm also very empathic. The attending was sitting there and he was taking notes. And I'm trying to present that we're going to be providing a transition of care to allow for the vent to be removed. And I'm sure your time in the NICU, you would understand there's some measures that can be taken to provide comfort as these transitions in care are happening. And the attending was just an older gentleman, very, very compassionate person. But he was just like that old movie, there's no crying in baseball, honey. Move along. And I was just like covered in tears. And I realized I developed some vasovagal symptoms after that ICU rounds because I became sort of like uncertain how to handle the strong emotions I was feeling by the acuity and complexity in the cases that were in front of me. And that was a big part of my path, my personal pathway to burnout. So I love what you said about how we have to have some personal ownership, some curiosity, and probably get help. A lot of us probably needs either coaching or therapy or other more involved interventions where we, because it wasn't structurally present, we have to first unlearn it and then repattern ourselves to a new way of thinking. And as Einstein, theoretically, we have all these quotes about famous people said, but if you keep getting the same result and, you think by the input that you're getting, you're putting the same input, you're definitely not going to get a different result. So I think this is such an important quality. And I'm curious if your understanding of that sort of propelled you forward to this family in focus. And I'd love to hear more about what that program is and what was happening inside you that you thought, maybe I'm a little limited in my time or what people expect to happen in a traditional pediatrician office visit. Tell us what the structure of this is, how it's existing a bit more.
So I would just like to take a moment for the listeners to say that's what we call a beautiful segue. Okay. I am taking notes on how to interview, how to do questions. That was beautiful.
I love it.
So I love, again, these questions because it's really something where, you're asking about different transitions and application. And, it's something that, again, I had so much of just kind of saying, this isn't working. That's what I kept on thinking, like that this isn't working. And, giving myself the space as I was starting to do more and more work in the community. And so still working clinically, but like, okay, I see that there's broader applications here. I see that, a lot of the things that I've traditionally approached, again, starting off with mental health, obesity, concerns about children's growth, everything was always through the context of the office. Having to come in, okay, this is what we all do in the medical office. And then I was working out in the community and, the original, the original source of all the inquiries was because I was charged to find a pediatric diabetes prevention program to be able to bring it to our community as a part of our community initiatives here. And I kept on looking and looking, and there's plenty of programs that are out there. And what struck me was that the attrition rates were really low. So there was all this effort being put into, let's get families into these programs. We've got 8, 12 weeks at a time. And noticing that families were limping to the end, or rather the programs were limping to get families to the end of it. I was like, okay, so I'm having my own struggles with engagement in the office. It sounds like even with these programs that are very structured and supported by the communities, but yet there's something missing. And so I kept on going back to what's missing. What is it that we're not approaching or we're not engaging with. And again, the same struggles that parents were having were the same ones I was having too, as far as being able to really translate all of this, like, this is what I've been taught is healthy. This is what we need to do to raise healthy children. Again, I got the script for it. Totally got it. I was trained like this. It wasn't a lack of training. It was something about that application in the home, in the community. This is beyond what we do in the medical office. But what was I missing there? And so as I was looking at it, with my own struggles, I was realizing that all the things that I was trying to do to follow the rules of what healthy needs to look like was creating more friction with my family. So, thinking about kind of like the food fight type of thing, finding the candy wrappers under the bed, arguing about how, no, I'm not getting out to move. You're just trying to get me to go and exercise. I don't like exercise. I'm like, I don't either. Like, I don't like that either. But recognizing what is it that's missing here? And it was that connection. It's the relationships. It's the emotional experience that's going on. And I realized that the more that someone tells me what to do, the more that I tell them where to go. I'm like, oh, hold on a minute. My kids do that too. Oh, they are, totally, what do you say? They're a totally spitting image of me. Yeah. And then these other kids too, like the more that we push kids, the more that they push back. It's like, well, how do we do this? And I realized that as I was starting to ask that question, I was starting to talk differently with families in the office, as well as, working here at home with my family. And I started looking more into the concept of relationships. At the same time, I had been getting my own coaching. Again, that burnout that had been, totally getting my own burnout coaching. And I realized that something was changing in front of my eyes that I never expected. You'd never guess what it is.
It was the family less chaotic, people more opting in?
No, it was my relationship with my mother-in-law.
Oh.
Okay, so I had been married for 20 plus years at that point in time. We all know that this beautiful woman in my life was not changing, okay? But our relationship was. And I was like, what is this? She's not changing, but this is so much better. And that's why I realized I was changing.
Mm.
And so what it is that each and every one of us contributes to a relationship, how I was changing the environment for both of us to be able to connect emotions, totally emotions. But as I started to see that, I was like, if this relationship can change, anything can change. Anything can change. And so that's where I started applying that to relationships with food, with movement, with our bodies, with each other. If we can shift long-standing relationships, which, by the way, does not require another person changing, what else is possible? Coming back to that, what else is possible question. That's where it really blew up, because it's asking different questions. It was totally changing the approach that I was taking in the office. And I talk about how this is really speaking a different language, finding what is working, understanding the relationships as they exist now. Not about just coming in and saying, we got to change all of this wholesale, because that's a recipe for pushback. And so it was changing the language, changing the conversation more than anything else.
And through that journey, did you segue into a new offer, if you will? Or is this just the family in focus? Is that something that embodies this, that you bring to different practices? Do you mentor others? I'd love to hear how this evolution, because that emotional awareness is probably the glue we need for our society to, not even sure what words I need to choose here, but it's an awareness and a skill set that helps us from defervescing into more vitriol, more chaos, more othering, this internal ownership of, wow, I'm having an experience here. It's a little bit about you, but it's mostly about me. So I want to see everyone have emotional awareness and emotional health. I have a personal objective subtly in this podcast to elevate conversations around emotions. My husband's a grief coach, so we are not emotion phobic in this household. And we've had lots of therapy and exploration and coaching ourselves. But tell us a little bit about how that evolved into an actual sort of business offer or entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. So it's still a work in progress. It all is. So I recognized early on that this conversation about, engaging with families about relationships, about building that connection. I was like, I don't want to have families all line up one by one to come and see me in the office, which, by the way, everybody's like, just get the physical done. Just focus on the physical. I'm like, this is not what I do anymore. I am not a turn and burn, just check the box kind of person. I want to actually understand so much more. And so Family in Focus was born from me saying, okay, well, I can use these skills in my medical practice. There's so much more for us to be able to expand this conversation, because this is not reserved for, for medical care. It totally works in medical care. Okay. And we'll talk more about that. But it's something that this isn't me practicing medicine. This is me engaging with humans. Okay. By the way, that's what we do all the time. We engage in the community. But having conversations about the role that emotions play in our lives, because emotions drive all of our behaviors. What we do, what we don't do, our habits, and everybody's like, oh, it's emotional eating. I'm like, honey, we are all emotional eaters. We all are. Let's stop talking about it as if that's like the big forbidden. But this is just what we're experiencing. Let's understand it. And in order to understand it, we just need to be able to connect and have some conversations, creating a space to be able to do that. And so Family in Focus was born from that desire to create a space where parents can just not have little ears listening, be vulnerable, leading by example. And, as far as like, I'm leading by example by saying, this is what I did wrong. This is what I'm doing wrong right now. But you know what? Is it really wrong, or is it just human? Like, this is just what's happening. And creating that space to be able to learn and explore together. And, the focus initially was really around parents of children who were overweight. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. I'm like, okay, it's not about the children's weight. It's about the worries that parents have about their children's weight. And so engaging with parents of children in larger bodies, as well as children who maybe were having struggles with actually gaining weight. As I was listening more and more, I'm like, it's actually not about the weight. I've been saying that the whole time. It's really not about the weight, but it's about that stress that parents are experiencing in raising a healthy family amidst, again, all of the rules, all of the peanut gallery that's telling you this is how you got to do it. This is what it's got to look like. And we're like, that's not working. So the stress that parents are experiencing, as well as the stress that our kids are experiencing. By the way, it's not always the same thing. Parents are laying awake at night, worried about how do I help my children amidst social pressures, mental health, weight concerns, eating concerns. Kids, anxiety. And so really Family in Focus is really shifting over time by saying, oh, now I see what's going on. Now I see what's going on. Let me see how I can connect with the whole family to really be able to kind of help each of them discover what's really going on, like how you're not alone. There's nothing broken with you, that, that you're experiencing this, which, by the way, is very different from the way that we do it in the medical office, which is, this is the problem that you have and this is where you need to go to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's a disservice just with the way that we have structured it. But this is what I'm seeing, observing in my family. These are the patterns that I'm seeing over here for myself as a parent. These are the patterns that I'm seeing for my child. When I'm working, one-on-one with kids, what are the patterns you observe? And really opening up those conversations. And then, of course, I play.
Yeah. Well, that piece of pattern recognition, I think, there's some things that really just come with time. And it's sort of the transmutation of knowledge into wisdom, right? When we're young in our careers, we have an inkling of patterns. We have but certainly as we progress through time and through relationships, we begin to see this particular pattern likely not going to work out. And it's sort of like, you can almost know it when the family or the individual is coming into the room itself. There's settled energy, there's chaotic energy, there's ability to make eye contact, there's ability to exhale. As clinicians, we're always picking up all these subtle cues and modulating to what's possible. And I think this skill set that you're generating will likely be extremely valuable for other clinicians over time. It sounds like at this point, it's not quite oriented to supporting other clinicians unless they themselves want to work with specifically within their own family system. Is that fair to say?
Okay, so I did not give you the full story. So
I'm just guessing here.
No. I appreciate that. So there's many different ways that, I am supporting folks on this journey through Family in Focus and also associated things. I always am looking at, let's connect and kind of hear, what is it that you're struggling with? What is it that, you're looking at? And then seeing, well, how can I help? And I think that there's a lot of things that it's kind of like, well, this is kind of like the package. I've got like the Family in Focus, the signature program. I've got the membership for parents. And then as a part of the membership for parents, you can get the one-on-one with me. And you can also, have your child get one-on-one, that kind of package. But there's also the community work. And so I am working with schools in particular about supporting their educators, and their school nurses, because, by the way, who knows what's going on in the building for kids and for the staff? It's the school nurses.
That's the truth.
But how much stress and particularly burnout the educators, anyone associated with the schools, are going through right now as a nature of their jobs, their lives, their relationships, but also supporting children as they're having their own emotional concerns that are coming to school with them. And so I'm actually taking that programming into the schools to be able to support teachers. Again, coming back to, how can I support those that are supporting children? How can I do that? And so those are the questions I keep on asking myself. I also have, programming with talking about, doing comedy, collaborating with my friend who's a professional comedian. And so he and I are combining to doing something called Improving Healthcare. Looks remarkably like improving healthcare, but it's connecting with those in healthcare areas about bringing in the tenets of improv and how that impacts communication, relationships, and I am there for the emotions that all come up and how this impacts the emotional health. And again, how that comes back to communication and relationships. I'm also collaborating. So again, EVMS, we have a number of studies that are in progress right now about weight stigma and how we can address weight stigma in the home in the clinical office as well, because as we're talking about trying to engage with patients, specifically teenagers here, concerns about weight, about concerns with their, different lifestyle habits. How can we do that while being very mindful of the concerns of weight stigma that these teens are already experiencing in the community, let alone what is the stigma that is popping up in the middle of these conversations? And how is it something that's pushing our teens away from having any kind of conversation about it? So there's a whole lot of different ways. So
I love this. You're just inviting opportunity. Like, this is the beautiful thing about all of this, is that, how is this possible that you could impact an entire community? It's through this level of curiosity and seed planting and connection. And I think every listener to this podcast can see themselves as 1,000 points of light, meaning the message and clarity and inner work is not for nothing, right? The toil, the struggle. We're now at a position in our careers and in our internal efficacy and belief in self to say, I've got a valid message. It's been vetted extensively over decades. I'm not just hopping on a social media bandwagon. This is the culmination of the combination of thousands of hours of exploration, personally and professionally. And I think you're embodying that so beautifully. And I love how you alluded to, just briefly, and I want to touch in on this as we're starting to wrap up. I want to be mindful of your time. I could go on, I'm sure, for another hour. But you mentioned that you're an improv comedian, and how, I'm curious, what do you think of the utilization of humor as a way to evoke emotion and get people more comfortable, perhaps with the uncomfortable? What genre of humor do you like to lean into? And is it ever raunchy? I don't know. I'm just curious. Asking for a friend.
If you know what you're asking there.
Like, how do we get people to laugh? How do we find things that are tragically funny or truly funny? Like, so first question, how do you see this impacting emotional health? And second, where do you get your material? Like, is it real life or?
It's all real life. Okay, let's answer that one first. So I have dabbled with stand-up comedy, which to me looks a lot more like storytelling because they're all true stories. And it's me kind of like poking fun and looking at what seems like contradictions and owning contradictions, because I love the whole concept, how everybody thinks it's got to be this or this. And I'm like, yes, they're both. And that's me. That's how I kind of live in between, both of these. I absolutely detest Amazon for everything. And I totally just ordered off of them. And I'm so grateful that I got to thank my driver with the $5 bonus thing yesterday. So, okay. Yes. Just that type of humor. Humor is in everything. When we choose to see it, there's the contradictions, there's the silliness, there's the things that we're like, how is that possible? So kind of like the disbelief type of humor. Of course, we always think about the dark humor versus, the raunchy, dirty humor, whatever it is. There's humor in so many places. And I think that the real opportunity is to be able to just say, well, what is it that humor brings to you? You first, not about looking into, how you use it in your practice and everything else, but what is that role of humor? And I found that kind of going back to the deep, dark burnout days, how much humor and fun were a part of what I was told wasn't allowed here. This isn't the space for this. I'm like, freaking pediatrician. What are you talking about? Like, did anybody else see Patch Adams? Like, humor heals. Like, what is this? Did y'all miss that? They're like, oh, well, that's Robin Williams. I'm like, yes, and let's just try that on. But what I found over time as I was doing that, long and winding road and messing around with all these different areas, that I was going out and, for me, it was improv, comedy, just going out and playing, checking my identity as a professional at the door. Pediatrician hat is off. Actually, mom hat is off. I'm just a girl who's out here just having some fun, seeing where, all these paths go. And I was having the time of my life. One of the, they talk about the rules of improv, and you may have heard me say yes and several times. That's one of the rules of improv. Always make your partner look good. Well, how can I use that in my clinical, interactions in the office? Even in conversations with my families, like I'm taking the rules of improv with me. Everybody's like, you're freaking funny. I'm like, actually, it's just kind of taking the same thing. We're making each other look good. We're having some fun together. Play. It's not a diversion. It's actually part of what makes us human. And yes, of course, I'm saying this as a pediatrician. This is like a part of my core, but it's also recapturing that part of me before I went through all the medical training that was like, no, you can't do this. This is who I am. This is who I am. And the way that I know that is that my mom reflects that to me all the time. She's like, you finally recaptured that joy that you had as a child. That, and she actually just sent me this. She Facebook messaged me.
So
2 days ago. Thanks, Mom. With this like meme that I was like, oh, Mom sees me. And she messaged me. But she's like, you're recapturing that joy, that spark. And so I think that humor is a part of that for me. The other thing about humor is that it diffuses whatever is going on. I use it in the office right away. I come into the office. So my primary clinical job right now, I've got a number of things going on, but my primary clinical is pediatric urgent care. Nobody comes to see me on their best day. I remind myself of that. And I walk in and I am lighthearted. I build connection by just picking someone in the room because, they come as an army. So everybody's there in the room and I just pick someone and I'm like, oh, tell me about that t-shirt. Tell me about the socks. Like I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for something that's standing out. And we just start building connection. And they're like, oh, you're fun. You're funny. All these types of things. It's just me being me. But it's bringing that in because it helps them feel more comfortable. It's totally paving the way. And I think that that's what humor does. It's greasing the skids for us to be able to create better connections, to even just create any kind of connection. There's a huge opportunity with humor.
I couldn't love that more. Humor is such a powerful tool. And I think sometimes people feel intimidated by bringing lightheartedness into the office, that it needs to be somber or serious or focused. But we can be excellent and be forming these connections and making it a little lighter, like you said, because people coming in to urgent care, obviously in the midst of something pretty significant, or if it's not significant, they're concerned it's significant. And the two are almost indistinguishable probably in terms of how the body of those around them, the stress response of those around them is happening. And so just that recognition that the web of the family might actually, if it relaxes, that the healing for whoever's there to be seen is easier. We know that stress interferes with everything: sleep, diet, digestion, microbiome, sense of self. Like there's no place that stress doesn't tap its magnificent head. So in the modern world. So I love this idea of reminding people that are listening that interconnectedness, and to not just walk in and ignore everyone who's there, which unfortunately sometimes people do because they think, oh, time is tight or I don't have the resource. But I think you've probably seen again and again that the visits are lighter easier and quicker when everyone's on board because they feel seen, heard, acknowledged. And boy, that is not a skill set. You know, they say physicians interrupt in the first 26 seconds or whatever that statistic is. But if you give people a minute or two to talk, that their satisfaction after the visit is sort of exponentially higher, and that they stop talking when they're done. And it's not usually, they recognize time is limited, and using those really subtle cues of invitation, curiosity, relaxation probably really facilitates urgent care visits. I love how you've woven all that together.
Well, if I can just kind of, I heard you talk about the stress that families are coming in with. Stress is emotions. It's just the emotional experience that we have to whatever is the stressor out here. And so I offer humor, okay? Not to be something that replaces that, but for one thing, to be able to kind of like offer in a way, you know, like how we talk about mirror neurons, what is it that I am sharing? And then also trying to see how I can engage with others. So not trying to discount that, but I am also known to just call out the elephant in the room. Like, ooh, there's something heavy going on in here. What are you feeling? What's going on? And they're like thinking that I'm absolutely hilarious when I'm just like, tell me about your emotions. But I'm doing it in a way that they're like, oh, okay, I can let this down right now because she's not asking me about my mood, because we don't want to talk about our mood because, you know, we might have some kind of stigma about that. But hey, what's going on here? I'm kind of feeling something kind of thick. And again, they think that I'm like hilarious. And I'm just like, no, seriously, I want to know what's going on. Because when we can give it a name, we can address it. Give it some light. Plenty of examples with grief. Love hearing about that. But naming it, to just be able to say, oh, that's what it is. Let's just create some space for it right here.
Yeah, it really is. What a beautiful hour we've had. It's flown by. Dr. Schofer, I am just delighted. You're one of my early guests, and what a beautiful tone you set for me to think about themes to explore, and the joy of raising a healthy family and having healthy relationships that's predicated on connection, curiosity, what's possible, and even the coaching model that we both probably deeply appreciate has transformed our lives considerably. Tell me a little bit about where the listeners can find you online, and we'll include these in our show notes as well.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to connect further. So I am a very simple girl. So you will notice that everything has to do with my name or family in focus. So if you go to my website, which is wendyschofermd.com, you will be able to learn so much more about my programs, my offerings, in particular with the Family in Focus, the signature program that I have for parents. And then I also have my own podcast, which again is Family in Focus with Dr. Wendy Schofer, that is going to be starting up with season number 2 very soon, which is going to be focusing more on the emotional health of the whole family. So the first 114 episodes were really leaning into how to raise a family without all of the focus on weight. 114 different episodes, story-based humor, all the things. And so I invite you to come on over to the website. You can check out with the free mini courses and different pop-up workshops that I have, all the different ways to connect. And of course, we can always talk more about bringing Family in Focus to your community.
That would be fabulous. I think everyone would be well served to jump in, and I'll have all those linked in our show notes. Thank you so much, Dr. Schofer, for joining me. And I look forward to, now that I know you in real life, to have a broader and deeper understanding of the work you're doing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to connect once again. So love it.